Have you ever wondered why some people naturally command respect and attention, while others seem to be invisible, even when they've given everything they have to offer? Maybe you found yourself in a room where everyone else is speaking, everyone else is being heard, yet you, with your wisdom and efforts, somehow remain unseen. Imagine being among friends or family members, offering advice, extending a hand when they need it most, but somehow finding yourself ignored, unappreciated, and last on their list of priorities. How do you change this dynamic? There's a truth few understand about human relationships. Recognition is rarely just given, it's cultivated. The Stoics believed that one's worth must first be acknowledged from within, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't also know how to navigate the world wisely. What if you had the tools to subtly shift others' perceptions? What if you could ensure that, in the quiet moments when your name crosses their mind, it stands out as someone they can't afford to ignore? Today, we'll uncover 9 carefully crafted psychological strategies that, when applied thoughtfully, can elevate your presence in others' lives. And stay until the end. The final strategy holds a truth that binds all others together and will change how you think about relationships forever. Let's begin. 1. Creating the fear of losing you. In a small, bustling town, there was a man named Elias. Known for his kindness, Elias was always there for his friends, family, and colleagues. If someone needed help, Elias was the first to offer it. If there was a gathering, he'd be the one to arrive early and stay late, making sure everyone felt comfortable and included. But deep down, Elias was troubled. Despite all his efforts, he felt like he was taken for granted. People assumed he'd always be there, that he'd always make time for them, but they rarely returned the favor. One day, after reflecting on his life with a sense of frustration, Elias stumbled upon an ancient idea. The fear of loss is often stronger than the desire for gain. He realized he had always been available, constantly showing others that his life revolved around them. In that moment, he decided to take a step back, not out of bitterness, but out of a desire to create space for himself and see if his absence would make a difference. So, Elias began to change his approach subtly. He stopped initiating every interaction, slowed down his responses, and started dedicating time to his own interests, his own growth. He wasn't harsh, but he became selectively unavailable. At first, his friends barely noticed. But as time passed, they began to feel his absence. Suddenly, invitations to gatherings came more frequently. They began reaching out, asking how he was doing, noticing his absence and, more importantly, the value he brought to their lives. The psychology behind it. People are often more motivated by the fear of losing something than by the desire to gain it. By creating a small distance, Elias helped his friends realize that his presence was not something to take for granted. His absence served as a reminder of his value, nudging them to prioritize him in ways they hadn't before. A Stoic reflection. This technique should be used wisely. In Stoicism, we are taught not to play games, but rather to approach relationships with sincerity. Elias's shift was rooted in respect, for himself and for his relationships. He simply allowed others the opportunity to miss him, to appreciate his value, without constantly pushing himself into their lives. After all, one who is overly eager may often be seen as too easily available, losing the respect and appreciation they truly deserve. Applying this in your life. Think about your own relationships. Are there people who have grown accustomed to you always being there, always giving? Imagine, just for a moment, taking a small step back. Start focusing on your own priorities, your own time. When they begin to feel your absence, they may come to realize just how much you bring to their lives. But remember, moderation is key. Withdraw with a light hand, and be prepared to step back in when the time is right. If this idea resonates, imagine what the next step could be. Could you become a priority in someone's life by simply shifting your own? Let's explore the next strategy and uncover how adjusting your availability could shape their perception of you. 2. Avoid being always available. Elias's journey didn't end with creating space. He soon realized that one of the reasons he was often overlooked was his constant availability. It's a hard truth to accept, isn't it? We're often taught that loyalty and consistency are virtues. But Elias began to understand that, while loyalty is indeed valuable, availability without boundaries can lead to being taken for granted. After all, when something is always accessible, people naturally assume it will always be there, waiting. Think about this. How often do you find yourself adjusting your plans to accommodate others? Elias had done this countless times. Friends would call him last minute, asking for favors or inviting him to gatherings with little notice. Without hesitation, he'd drop his plans and say, yes. But this constant yes was slowly erasing his value in their eyes. They knew he'd always be there, always willing to adapt to their schedules, and thus, they stopped valuing his time as much as they might value someone who set clearer boundaries. A new way to respond. One evening, a close friend called Elias to ask if he could help with a sudden favor. This time, Elias paused. Instead of immediately agreeing, he politely declined, explaining that he already had plans for himself. To his surprise, his friend was taken aback and maybe even a little disappointed. But something interesting happened. The next time they spoke, Elias noticed a shift in his friend's tone. There was a new respect, a subtle acknowledgement that Elias's time was valuable too. Over time, he learned to find a balance. He would still make himself available to help those he cared about, but he no longer sacrificed his own priorities. If a request conflicted with his personal plans, he would decline politely, sometimes even offering to reschedule. This small act of self-respect created a profound effect on those around him. He was no longer the friend they could call at a moment's notice, with the assumption he'd drop everything. They began to value his presence more, realizing he too had a life, goals, and commitments. The psychology behind it. This strategy is about creating a perception of value through availability. When we're always ready to accommodate others, our presence may start to seem less special. It's not about being unkind or distant. It's about balancing your availability so that others see you as someone whose time is worth considering. Humans tend to appreciate what requires a little effort, and by establishing these small boundaries, Elias reminded his friends that he wasn't simply a convenience. A Stoic perspective on balance. In Stoicism, the concept of self-respect is fundamental. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to remain true to his principles, to value his time, and to cultivate a sense of inner worth. Elias's approach reflects this balance, being helpful and present, but not at the cost of his own priorities. To a Stoic, placing value on one's time is not selfish. It's an acknowledgement of one's inner worth and commitment to a life guided by virtue. How you can apply this? Consider your own life. How often do you set aside your plans for others, even when it inconveniences you? Imagine the respect you could cultivate by making your availability a conscious choice rather than an open door. Try responding thoughtfully the next time someone reaches out, and consider whether saying no or not now might actually strengthen the relationship. People often respect those who respect themselves, and valuing your own time is a powerful way to inspire this in others. A question to reflect on. Have you ever felt that your constant availability has led others to take you for granted? What if, like Elias, you began to balance your presence, showing others that your time is something to be cherished? This small change could make all the difference. With Elias's journey unfolding, we move next to a strategy that's woven into the intrigue of human nature. It's one that can subtly draw people closer by engaging their curiosity. Let's uncover the art of mystery, a powerful tool in the quest for respect and priority. 3. Maintain some mystery. As Elias continued on his path of self-discovery, he encountered an intriguing realization. People are naturally drawn to the unknown. In his past, Elias had been an open book, always willing to share every detail of his life with those around him. He had thought that transparency would make him more relatable, that openness would create deeper connections. But as he looked back, he noticed that the more he revealed, the less interested people seemed to be. So, Elias decided to try something different. He started sharing a little less, choosing his words carefully, leaving a hint of mystery in his conversations. When people asked him about his plans or interests, he would give thoughtful but brief responses. If asked about his weekend, he might simply say, "I had an interesting time exploring something new," without going into detail. It wasn't that he was hiding anything. Rather, he was allowing people's curiosity to breathe. The art of intrigue. One evening, he was invited to a gathering where, as usual, friends began discussing their personal lives. Instead of sharing his latest experiences as he normally would, Elias listened more, asked questions, and shared only small, intriguing hints about his own activities. At one point, someone asked about his recent trip, expecting a detailed story. Instead, he simply said, "It was an unforgettable experience. I'll have to tell you more about it another time." His friends, who were accustomed to him being open, seemed intrigued, even a bit mystified. To his surprise, the effect was immediate. They began to ask him more questions, showing a level of interest he hadn't seen before. In time, they began reaching out more, curious about the parts of his life he hadn't revealed. By leaving parts of his story untold, Elias created a sense of wonder around him, sparking a curiosity that led others to value his presence in a way they hadn't before. The psychology behind it. People are often drawn to what they don't fully understand. Maintaining a touch of mystery taps into this natural inclination, engaging others' curiosity and encouraging them to invest more time and energy in getting to know you. When people sense there's more to uncover, they're often more likely to pay attention and prioritize you in their lives. Stoicism and the inner self. The Stoic perspective encourages us to cultivate a rich inner life, a place of personal growth and self-reflection that doesn't need to be openly shared with everyone. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the importance of keeping certain thoughts and reflections private, a practice that aligns well with maintaining a degree of mystery. In Stoicism, self-sufficiency and inner depth are virtues, and by holding back a bit of yourself, you reinforce the idea that your life isn't on display for everyone to dissect. Applying this in your own life. Consider this. The next time someone asks about your day, your hobbies, or a recent experience, try giving a response that invites curiosity without revealing too much. Instead of describing every detail, leave a few things unsaid. Notice how people respond when you share just enough to pique their interest. This isn't about withholding for the sake of attention, but rather about creating a healthy balance in how much you reveal, allowing others to take a genuine interest in you. A question to reflect on. Do you often find yourself sharing every detail of your life with others? Imagine if you held back just a bit, not to be deceptive, but to invite curiosity. How might this subtle shift change how others perceive and prioritize you? As Elias began to understand the power of mystery, he also realized that relationships require a sense of investment from both sides. Up next, we explore a strategy that encourages others to invest in you, deepening the connection and making your presence a priority in their lives. 4. Allow others to invest in you. Elias's journey was teaching him more about relationships than he had ever expected. Through creating space and balancing his availability, he began to notice that people valued him more, but there was still something missing. He realized that, in the past, he had done most of the giving. He was the one constantly offering help, support, and time. It dawned on him that he had never given others a true chance to invest in him, to feel that they were contributing something meaningful to his life. One evening, Elias was helping his friend Noah move into a new apartment. It was a tiring day, but he enjoyed being there for his friend. As they unpacked boxes, Noah casually asked, "Elias, you're always helping everyone. Why don't you ever ask for help yourself?" It was a question that struck Elias deeply. He realized that he rarely asked anything of others, afraid perhaps of being a burden or inconveniencing them. In truth, though, allowing others to help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an invitation for them to feel connected and valued in his life. Letting others give. So Elias began to take small steps to allow others to invest in him. The next time he needed help moving some heavy furniture, he reached out to Noah. At first, it felt uncomfortable, as though he was imposing. But Noah was more than willing, showing up enthusiastically. It became clear that by allowing Noah to help, Elias was actually strengthening their bond. His friend appreciated the opportunity to return the support he'd received, creating a feeling of mutual investment. Over time, Elias noticed that the more he allowed his friends and family to contribute to his life, the more they prioritized him. It was as though the act of giving naturally deepened their commitment, and Elias felt more valued than ever before. Instead of feeling like he was being a burden, he found that by letting others invest in him, they felt a stronger connection and appreciation for him. The psychology behind it. People tend to value more those things and people into which they invest their time, energy, and resources. When someone makes an effort to support or contribute to your life, they feel a deeper connection, often without even realizing it. This investment fosters a sense of loyalty and appreciation that can transform the way they view and prioritize you. A Stoic insight on mutual support. How you can apply this in your life. Think about the people in your life who often offer help or support. When was the last time you allowed them to invest in you? Consider the next time you have a need or a challenge, and let someone close to you step in. Ask a friend for advice, accept help with a project, or simply allow someone to share a burden. Notice how this changes the relationship dynamic, making you a priority in a natural and meaningful way. A question to reflect on. How often do you let others contribute to your life? Do you feel uncomfortable asking for help, even when you need it? What if, by allowing others to give back, you could actually deepen the bond and become a true priority in their lives? With Elias allowing others to invest in him, he found that his relationships grew richer and more meaningful. Yet he knew there was more he needed to do to maintain his sense of self-worth in these connections. In the next strategy, we explore how Elias learned to prioritize his own needs as a way to ensure that he was truly valued. 5. Prioritize your needs. As Elias's journey unfolded, he encountered a profound realization. While it was wonderful to be there for others, he had neglected one very important person, himself. All his life, Elias had placed everyone else's needs above his own. He thought that being selfless was the path to meaningful relationships and respect. Yet he often felt exhausted and, at times, even resentful. This wasn't how he wanted to feel. One evening, after a particularly tiring week of helping friends and family, Elias found himself reflecting on his own life, his own desires. When was the last time he did something simply for himself? A quiet voice within him answered, it had been a very long time. So Elias made a decision. He would start honoring his own needs and ensuring that his well-being came first. At first, this felt uncomfortable. He worried that prioritizing himself might seem selfish, or that others might judge him for not being as available. But he knew deep down that it was a necessary step. Learning to say no. His friend was surprised but understanding, and to Elias's relief, the relationship didn't suffer. In fact, as time went on, his friend began to respect Elias's boundaries, valuing him more for honoring his own needs. By prioritizing himself, Elias found that his relationships actually improved. He had more energy, more joy, and a stronger sense of purpose, and those around him began to notice and respect him even more. The psychology behind it. Prioritizing your needs isn't selfish, it's essential. When people see that you value yourself, they're more likely to value you as well. Establishing boundaries and honoring your personal needs sends a clear message that you're a person with goals, dreams, and commitments. This approach often leads others to view you as someone with purpose and direction, making them more likely to prioritize you in their lives. Stoicism and self-respect. In Stoicism, the concept of self-respect is integral. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about staying true to oneself and not sacrificing inner peace for external approval. By respecting his own needs, Elias embodied a Stoic principle that one should live in harmony with their own nature and purpose. Stoicism teaches that we cannot serve others fully if we are neglecting ourselves, for the strength to support others comes from a well-nurtured spirit. How you can apply this? Reflect on the areas of your life where you often compromise your needs for others. The next time you're faced with a choice, ask yourself, is this truly what I want? It's not about shutting others out, but rather about finding a balance where you honor your own needs as much as you honor others. Start with small steps, such as setting aside time for yourself each day, and gradually build the confidence to prioritize what brings you fulfillment. A question to reflect on. Do you often place others' needs above your own, to the point of feeling drained? Imagine how your relationships might shift if you began honoring your own needs. Would people respect you more, seeing that you have a life and purpose beyond their demands? With Elias setting boundaries and nurturing his own well-being, he was on a path to self-respect and mutual appreciation. But he knew that to truly be valued, he also had to shift his mindset about relationships. In the next strategy, he learns that he must avoid making others the center of his life. This powerful realization takes him one step closer to becoming a true priority. 6. Don't make others the center of your life. Elias's journey was bringing him new insights, each one transforming how he viewed relationships. After learning to prioritize his needs, he began to notice another pattern in his life. He had often made others the very center of his world, whether it was family, close friends, or even past relationships. Elias would focus his energy on ensuring their happiness, organizing his time around their needs and desires. But in doing so, he had gradually lost touch with his own goals, his own path. This realization struck him deeply. Reflecting on his past relationships, he could see how his constant focus on others had led to a sense of emptiness. By making others his priority, he had slowly lost his own sense of purpose. It wasn't their fault, he realized. It was his choice to make others his focal point. Reclaiming his own life. Determined to regain a sense of balance, Elias began to focus more on his personal interests. He returned to hobbies he had once loved but set aside, like painting and hiking, and he pursued goals that were important to him, regardless of how they fit into others' lives. By doing this, Elias reclaimed his individuality, his sense of self that had been overshadowed by his desire to please others. At first, some people in his life were surprised. Friends who were used to his constant availability now saw him busy with his own pursuits, and some even questioned the change. But over time, they began to appreciate Elias for the person he was becoming, someone independent, driven, and self-sufficient. Rather than focusing on earning their approval, Elias found that he had become more respected. People valued him not as someone who existed for their sake, but as an individual with his own purpose. The psychology behind it. There's a natural tendency in human psychology to value what we feel we cannot fully have or control. By not making others the sole focus of his life, Elias created a subtle intrigue. When people see someone dedicated to their own growth, they're often drawn to that energy, seeing it as a sign of strength and maturity. They feel inspired to invest more in the relationship because they sense that this person's time and attention are genuinely valuable. A Stoic approach to self-worth. How you can apply this. Consider areas of your life where you might be giving too much of yourself to others. Ask yourself, are there hobbies, dreams, or goals that you've set aside because you've been too focused on others? Start small. Dedicate a portion of each day or week to something you love, something that's purely for you. Notice how this affects your mood, your energy, and ultimately, how others begin to respond to you. A question to reflect on. Do you often make others the center of your world? What if, by centering your life around your own growth and happiness, you could actually become more valued, respected, and appreciated by those around you? As Elias learned to focus on his own path, he found that people naturally started valuing his presence more. But he also realized that there was another habit he needed to break, the habit of always being the one to reach out first. This next strategy taught him how to maintain a balance in communication and deepen his connections further. 7. Stop initiating communication all the time. As Elias's perspective evolved, he began to notice another recurring pattern. He was always the one reaching out first. Whether it was friends, family, or colleagues, he would be the one to start conversations, make plans, and check in on how others were doing. This habit had started innocently enough. He valued these relationships and wanted to stay connected. But over time, it began to feel one-sided, as though he was putting in all the effort while others simply received it. Elias wondered, what would happen if I stopped initiating every conversation? Would anyone reach out to me if I didn't go out of my way to stay in touch? A small experiment. With some hesitation, Elias decided to test this idea. He chose not to initiate communication for a few days and waited to see if anyone would notice his absence. At first, it was difficult. He felt an urge to reach out, to keep up with everyone as he always had. But as he waited, he noticed something unexpected. Some of his friends did reach out, asking how he was, wanting to know why he had been so quiet lately. Others didn't reach out, but he realized that maybe these relationships had always been more of a one-way street. This simple experiment taught Elias a valuable lesson. Genuine connections are balanced. When he stopped shouldering the full burden of communication, he found out who truly valued his presence and who was simply accustomed to his constant availability. The psychology behind it. When one person is always the initiator, it can create an imbalance in the relationship. The other person may start to take this effort for granted, assuming that the connection will always be maintained without needing to reciprocate. By stepping back and allowing others to reach out, Elias gave his relationships the space to grow organically, based on mutual interest rather than habit. A Stoic perspective on balance in relationships. The Stoics valued relationships built on mutual respect and reciprocity. Epictetus taught that we should not pursue relationships based solely on attachment or dependency, but rather on shared values and virtues. By allowing others to initiate, Elias was honoring this principle, ensuring that his relationships were balanced and built on mutual effort rather than one-sided dependence. How you can apply this. Reflect on your own relationships. Are you often the one to initiate communication, to check in, or to make plans? If so, consider stepping back, even just slightly, to see how others respond. Notice which relationships flourish with this new balance and which seem to fade. It may be uncomfortable at first, but it can reveal a lot about the true strength of your connections. A question to reflect on. Do you feel that you're often the one keeping relationships alive? What if you allowed others the opportunity to reach out to you, to show their interest in maintaining the bond? How might this shift reveal who truly values your presence? As Elias continued to deepen his understanding of balanced relationships, he discovered an even more profound truth, that true happiness must come from within. In the next strategy, he learns the importance of creating his own joy rather than relying on others to fulfill his sense of worth. 8. Create your own happiness. As Elias continued his journey of self-discovery, he arrived at a pivotal realization. He had spent much of his life depending on others to feel complete. Whether it was family, friends, or romantic relationships, he looked to them for validation, joy, and a sense of purpose. But relying on others in this way often left him disappointed, especially when they couldn't meet his expectations or when he felt overlooked. It became clear that to be truly valued, he needed to find fulfillment within himself. One afternoon, Elias decided to dedicate time solely to his own interests and passions, things he'd put on hold while focusing on others. He dusted off an old guitar that had been lying in his closet for years, and he began to play again, finding a sense of peace in the music he created. He took himself on small adventures, exploring new parts of the city he hadn't visited, reading books that inspired him, and setting personal goals that gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Gradually, Elias found that he no longer felt as dependent on others for his happiness. Becoming whole within yourself. The impact of this shift was profound. When he interacted with others, Elias was no longer searching for validation or approval. He was simply enjoying their company. His newfound independence and joy radiated from him, and others noticed. His friends were drawn to his confidence and calmness, sensing that he was content within himself. He no longer needed their attention to feel complete, and paradoxically, this made them appreciate him more. People gravitated toward him, sensing the quiet strength of someone who could stand alone, yet still cherish connections. The psychology behind it. When we depend on others for happiness, we unknowingly place pressure on them to meet our expectations, which can lead to disappointment for both sides. By cultivating our own happiness, we relieve others of this unspoken responsibility and create a more genuine, fulfilling connection. Self-sufficiency in happiness also inspires respect and admiration from others, as they see that you're capable of living a balanced life, content with or without their attention. Stoicism and inner contentment. In Stoicism, one of the key principles is the pursuit of inner tranquility, an idea famously championed by Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics believed that true happiness must come from within, not from external sources that are beyond our control. By focusing on his own joy and fulfillment, Elias was practicing Stoic wisdom, finding that real peace doesn't rely on others, but rather on his own alignment with his values, interests, and sense of purpose. This inner contentment allowed him to bring his best self into every relationship, free from neediness or dependency. How you can apply this? Reflect on the sources of your own happiness. Are they primarily external, reliant on others' actions and approval? Imagine shifting your focus to activities, goals, and passions that bring you joy independently. Dedicate time each day to things that uplift you, whether it's a hobby, personal goal, or simply spending time in nature. As you grow more content within yourself, notice how it affects your relationships. People may begin to appreciate your presence even more, sensing the stability and confidence that comes from a self-sufficient life. A question to reflect on. How often do you look to others for happiness? What if, like Elias, you began to cultivate your own joy, independent of anyone else's actions? How might this change the way people perceive and value your presence? With Elias now centered in his own happiness, he felt a profound sense of peace and confidence in his relationships. But he knew there was one final lesson left to learn, a powerful reminder that true strength lies in being willing to walk away from anything that doesn't honor his worth. This last strategy, the culmination of his journey, would teach him the ultimate act of self-respect. 9. Be willing to walk away. Elias's journey had brought him clarity and strength in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had learned to create his own happiness, to balance his availability, and to let others invest in him. But one last lesson remained, one that required him to embrace a difficult truth. Sometimes, to be valued and respected, you have to be willing to walk away. Elias had a longtime friend, Ben, who had always been part of his life. Their friendship had weathered many seasons. But as Elias grew and changed, he began to realize that Ben's behavior often left him feeling undervalued. Ben would call on Elias whenever he needed help or advice. Yet when Elias needed support, Ben was nowhere to be found. Over time, Elias noticed that he felt drained after their interactions, as though he was giving far more than he received. The courage to let go. At first, Elias hesitated to address this imbalance. He valued loyalty, and the thought of ending a friendship he'd invested in for so many years felt daunting. But he also understood that remaining in one-sided relationships would only undermine his growth. After careful thought, Elias decided that if Ben couldn't reciprocate or respect the boundaries he'd worked so hard to build, he would need to step back from the friendship. So, the next time Ben reached out, Elias had a calm but honest conversation with him. He expressed his feelings and his hope for a more balanced relationship. But Ben brushed off his concerns, unwilling to see Elias's perspective. With a sense of resolve, Elias made the difficult choice to let go. It wasn't an act of bitterness or anger. Rather, it was a final step in honoring his own worth. To his surprise, as word spread among his friends, they respected him even more for the choice he had made. They saw a man who valued himself enough to leave behind what no longer served him, a person who refused to compromise his self-worth. And while letting go of his friendship with Ben was painful, it created space in Elias's life for relationships that uplifted him, people who valued him just as much as he valued them. The psychology behind it. Being willing to walk away from relationships that don't honor your worth sends a powerful message, both to yourself and to others. It shows that you value yourself enough to seek mutual respect in every connection. This willingness often compels people to respect you more, as they realize that your presence isn't guaranteed. It must be earned. In psychology, this principle is known as self-empowerment, where you control your worth rather than allowing others to define it. Stoicism and the strength to let go. The Stoics believed in the importance of inner strength and integrity. Epictetus taught that we must release our attachment to things outside our control, and this includes relationships that don't honor our dignity. By walking away, Elias embodied a Stoic virtue, showing that he valued his inner peace over the need to please others. True strength, the Stoics would argue, is found in aligning one's actions with one's values, even when it means making difficult choices. How you can apply this? Reflect on your relationships and ask yourself if there are any that consistently drain or undermine your sense of self-worth. Consider having an honest conversation to express your needs. If the other person cannot meet you halfway, then, like Elias, you may find that stepping away is the ultimate act of self-respect. Remember, this isn't about anger or blame. It's about honoring your own worth and making space for relationships that uplift you. A question to reflect on. Is there a relationship in your life where you feel consistently undervalued? Imagine if you chose to prioritize your self-respect, being willing to walk away if necessary. How might this decision reshape your sense of worth and encourage others to value you more deeply? Elias's journey is one that resonates deeply because, at its heart, it's about self-respect, self-worth, and self-growth. Through these 9 strategies, Elias transformed his relationships not by manipulating others, but by embracing his own value and living in a way that invited others to recognize it too. He learned that true respect and priority come not from seeking validation, but from cultivating inner strength, independence, and a willingness to set boundaries. Think about your own journey. How might these principles apply to your life? Can you imagine a version of yourself who is valued, respected, and cherished by others? Not because you demand it, but because you live in a way that naturally commands it? If these lessons resonated with you, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. What steps might you take to build stronger, more balanced relationships? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more insights, and share it with others who might find these lessons valuable. May your journey towards self-respect and inner peace bring you fulfillment and strength. Thank you for watching, and remember, true worth begins within.